We've got Prevelton, Matt, Shane, Colin.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry, yeah.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Afternoon, everybody. How are we?
Very good, David. Very good. Yes, I couldn't hear Shane before either when he spoke.
Yo, can you guys hear us now? Okay, good. There we are. Shane, we need one of your t-shirts, mate. Are you muted? Good. Okay, we're up to the minutes of the last meeting and we'll rejoin our agenda now. So that's on page 5 of today's agenda and the confirmation of those minutes. Shane, there's been a little bit of toing and froing around comments. Do you want to say anything? No, we can't hear you.
Sam, I'm happy to speak to that. I guess at the time it went past quite quickly, but I wonder whether in the speed of it passing, we just lost a bit of process there, because the minutes are a really important. I mean, they're a bit bland and they're a bit annoying, but they are a fundamental piece of meeting agenda objectives, and to unilaterally decide that 25 words is apt to describe what went on in a meeting is probably not best practice. And I think we all agree that we don't want verbatim records, but we also agree that we want minutes that can be picked up by a layman who hasn't been at the meeting and can understand what was said in the context. And I think we leave that in the hands of the minute takers, but to include that paragraph that it must be 25 words, I think is harnessing the minute takers to an unachievable goal, and should perhaps be rescinded out of the minutes to just say minutes will be taken in the appropriate form or something to that, because clearly there are issues, and you note in this minutes here Deborah's conflict of interest statement, which took substantive minutes to actually get down in a clear form, but it was worthwhile having that length of minute to get the position accurate. And so I guess I'm just suggesting that maybe we revisit that discussion point and say back to the status quo of minutes accurately describing the conversation in an abbreviated form would be something that I would suggest.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Marr. And the 25 words was not a direction to the minute taker or to raise. It was if there were things that weren't included in what Councillor Epeha was wanting to add, to limit what he wanted rather than to have 3 or 4 paragraphs of added words. I agree, we need to make sure that the minutes clearly identify what's there, and we leave that in the hands of the minute taker. The question now is, Councillor Epeha would like to have a couple of paragraphs added in there, and is that what the meeting would like to see, or are we happy with that the original minutes actually carried the conversation, which was well over an hour's worth of conversation at the time? Yeah, so they can either be inserted or not inserted, but we just need to make a decision. And I agree, Grant, let's leave things generally in the hands of the minute taker.
My concern, Sam, is that the minutes accurately record the debate, because I'd hate to see a position where the minutes become burnished or enhanced to not negatively reflect on members or the council. It has to be an accurate reflection of the debate and its pros and cons.
Yes. Malcolm Lyle.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you for your comments, Grant. I've been around the table a long time, and over the years, we've never had a Hansard type of recording of minutes, and it's just as well, I fear. I realise people may want to trumpet what they're saying, particularly in election years, and I think we run into a danger here if we start including greater comment from some and not having greater comment from everybody else. And I would temper that comment with the fact that in this day and age now, the whole conversation is available on the council's YouTube channel. If the public want to see what's happening in the minutes, they can actually look and listen to exactly what was said word for word. So I do think we are being somewhat pedantic here. I remember the debate on the day. Councillor Epeha was asked to add some more words to succinctly point to some of the points he made. We're not talking about 1,000 words here. We decided that 25 was adequate. And that was a decision made by all of us around the table at the time in a democratic way. So I think that should stand. The minutes are available online to watch and listen. They're up there for perpetuity, I believe. So if you're concerned about what's being said, it is there. You can direct people to a link to that website should you wish to. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. Mark and then Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I respect Shane's wanting to have the minutes accurately reflect what he said, but they are a summation and not a verbatim quote. I have always restricted myself when I do make corrections or additions into actually making sure that they merely reflect the intent of what I said rather than every word I said. All of us at times can get quite verbose, and if we were to have minutes that were Hansard like, they'd be huge. I don't think they'd add any value. So I think that's why the restriction was made. The minute takers do an excellent job in trying to catch what we say. It's not an easy job. I've been a minute taker in other meetings, and sometimes they don't get it right and need a nudge or a tweak to get the intent of what was said. But we don't want any of us, and not just Shane, any of us to be able to deliver a speech to be inserted into the minutes to reflect what we did say or what we meant to say at a previous meeting. As long as the minutes reflect the tone of the conversation, I believe they are correct, and I believe the limit was correct, and I think that's how we've worked, and that's worked well. Thank you.
Cool. Are there any other views from members of the meeting? Deborah.
Just one comment. I think you'll find that our debates in Public Excluded are not on YouTube. And hence, when a debate turns up and is actually can be substantiated, as Councillor Miller's just said, it's very helpful for somebody to understand why a decision was made in that light. And that's why I'm just highlighting the appreciation for the minute taker. No, it's in PX, but for explaining how I arrived at the decision with regards to having a conflict of interest. I just want to highlight that won't be found on YouTube. Thank you.
Anyone else want to say anything on this matter? Okay, so we had original minutes that had quite a lengthy amount of conversation reflecting each councillor's comments. The conversation itself was over an hour if people want to have a look at it on YouTube. Comments from each councillor were noted in that time, and we'll continue to allow the minute taker to accurately reflect the meeting going forward using the number of words that she needs to or he needs to use in that time. And we're happy to move and second that the minutes of the last meeting are true and correct. Moved Mark, seconded Sophie. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. And yeah, those in the room can say aye, and online, if you could please keep putting your hand up or for or against, that way we can see the way that you're voting. Thank you. The next item is the Chief Executive's report, and it's on page 17 of today's agenda. So David, hopefully you can hear us and we'll hear you, and I'll hand the floor over.
Mr Mayor, councillors, members of the public, good afternoon. So there are a number of items for information in this report, and one substantive recommendation, which is recommendation B on page 17, and that's to agree to include Kāinga Ora as a member of the Chief Executive Advisory Group. This has been discussed at the CE group, and the CE of Kāinga Ora has in fact sat in on the group for the last couple of meetings, adds considerable value, as a note in the italicised commentary, where I say that they bring valuable knowledge and tools relevant to the partnership's work, but particularly when we're taking this collective approach towards the spatial planning across the Canterbury region. So on behalf of the Chief Executive's Advisory Group, would respectfully request Council's support of recommendation B. Mr Mayor, I'll talk to the rest of the report and we'll come back to that. On page 18, I refer to the Local Government Pecuniary Interest Register. I make a comment in the second paragraph where I say it now seems likely that the bill will be enacted prior to the election. I'll put a line through most of that and say more definitively it will be enacted prior to the 2022 local body election. So this came out of a private member's bill. A former Deputy Mayor of Palmerston North City Council was the initiator of it. And the key things, we currently have a register of interest, but there are some significant additions, and these will have to be declared, and all candidates heading into the next election need to be aware of these. So I'll just go through the key points. So the first interest that needs to be registered includes any directorship where you own more than 10% of the shares in a company. The second one is financial interest in a company, or more definitively shareholding in any company or organisation. Employment, so not salary, but I work for ABC Limited. Membership of any organisation that receives or applies for funding from the council. So might be a member of the local golf club. Do I need to declare that? No. But if that club was to apply for funds from council, then yes, you would be required to declare that membership. Location of any real estate, gifts from people who are not family members exceeding more than $500. The next one's a bit intriguing. It said any overseas travel funded by somebody other than a member of the elected member's family. So the scenario here would be if you're, for example, going overseas for work or maybe sport or recreation, something like that as a representative, and your fares, should I say, are paid other than by yourself, and payments for other activities, so consulting work that you might be engaged in for quite some time. So these are requirements under this new Pecuniary Interest Act. Going down, the bill doesn't require disclosure. The third bullet point just needs a bit of explanation. It says any contracts with council. That is because those contracts are already covered under the Members Interest Act requirements. This is the $25,000 threshold. And personally, I think they sort of missed an opportunity to review that because that 25K has been there for quite some time. So be aware of those changes. Third item is draft annual plan engagement sessions. We started yesterday, and some of those who went might be able to speak to those, as I understand about half a dozen members of the public. And we've got various ward drop-in sessions, Thursday of this week, Monday, Wednesday of next week, and a few community events that we're heading to. For the information of the public, I've included the press release on the new representation structure, but more importantly, for the information of the community, there will be pre-election candidate meetings held in Rolleston on the 30th of June, Darfield on the 29th of June, and we've subsequently added a further one in West Melton on Tuesday, the 28th of June. So they will be led by Stephen and myself, and they're exclusively designed for people who are considering putting their names forward for election. And then I've included three pieces of information. The first one about the water pipeline from as you were, from Sheffield to Springfield. And if there's any questions on that, Murray Washington will be able to answer, but my understanding is the contract for that has started. An acknowledgement of an external national award that our Selwyn Sports Centre won, and also some good news about the Selwyn Learn, Earn and Grow series. So, Mr. Mayor, quite a bit in there, and happy to answer any questions from anybody. Thank you.
Thanks, David, for that. Are there any questions that people have or comments they'd like to make on items that were in David's paper? Councillor Miller.
Can anybody hear me?
David, just some clarity around pecuniary interests, particularly bullet point 2. When it talks about financial interests in other companies, does that include trading shares on NZX? So would there be expectation if you're regularly trading shares that you'll be required each month to record your trades in and out of companies?
It's certainly got to be updated on a very regular basis, Grant. Yeah, sadly.
So it does include NZX share trading?
That's, it's not a definitive yes from me, but that's the best of my understanding, and I will undertake to gain clarity. As I say, it's not in its final form yet, but this just currently proposed to be in the final form, including that. Let me come back to you.
Thanks, David. Bob and Shane.
Really a question of Murray. It was discussed at the community board yesterday about the Springfield water, and a question was asked, how will that affect Sheffield? And in that time, I just like to understand that a wee bit more. Thanks.
Well, yeah, thank you. The intent for Sheffield at this stage is that of the pipelines installed and through, the peak pressure on Sheffield and Springfield won't be felt until probably next summer when we get the high demand. If we operated both schemes on normal winter usage, we would have no problem. So it would be a matter while we get Springfield sorted to probably have some restrictions over the summer on both schemes. But the intention long term is that that Sheffield to Springfield line will provide resilience to the Sheffield scheme, and vice versa. If we ever have an incident where we require to provide Sheffield, then we can take it from Springfield. So it actually builds resilience right through the schemes.
Thank you. Councillor Epeha.
Kia ora tātou, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
It was an issue from my end. Timely. Yep. Nice to see you all still on a hybrid Zoom. First of all, the minutes are passed, so thank you very much for the debate and the conversation. I guess I am somewhat disappointed, but however, it leaves me, a little option to continue the conversation. So, David, just regarding your report with the UPG, was there any discussion around the unintended consequences of such like the issues that were brought to council regarding the fast track of the amendment to the fast track building bill, if that makes sense at all? Was there any discussion on that? I see Kāinga Ora, it's a recommendation from central government to include Kāinga Ora into the working group. Obviously, there's a win from our perspective with resources and I guess their know-how and can do. Do they have any terms or conditions that they would bring to the table as well, and what they would expect to see in return? And I just have one more question on the next page. Just with regards to their pecuniary interests, will there be any change to what we currently have? Does that mean that the information is more accessible than it currently is? We currently have a interests register at this point. I think the audit and risk at least do. So how do you see that changing for the better? And as the CEO of the council, do you see any risks to those that have interests? And just a sort of a question around engaging our public and those that wish to stand. Do you think this may perhaps be something of a hindrance to those that perhaps have the experience to be great councillors, but perhaps through associations or directorships may now think not to? I think transparency is good, but I'm just interested in the motivation, I guess, behind the transparency of this register. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a number of questions. So, Shane, starting with your first one, no, Kāinga Ora haven't brought any expectations to the table, but rather it's probably the other way around, that we see that they will provide benefit to us as we get into the spatial planning, particularly when you talk about social, affordable, equitable, whatever term it is you want to associate with particular housing groups. In respect to the pecuniary interest amendment bill, and bearing in mind that it's only been through the second reading, it hasn't fully passed through Parliament at this stage, thus my dollar each way response to Grant before. The greatest risk, Shane, is lack of awareness of what it is that you are required to declare. So that's where it's very, very important that I have these briefing sessions with yourselves, and then further down the track when the bill is enacted, but then also those who are thinking of standing for council at the next election are very aware of what the requirements are. We are required to have a public register of interest at this stage. It is accessible. It should be updated regularly, and I know our staff continue to talk to elected members. There is more information required this time around. Will that have a negative impact? Look, I can't answer that. That would only be up to those people who are thinking of standing in and how they want to protect their information. And finally, does it require additional information? Yeah, there is more so than we currently have at the moment in terms of some of the quite specific detail. So I will continue to keep you informed, but certainly on our information packs for new members, that'll be very, very clearly identified.
Thank you, David. Sorry, Sam, I just have one more question.
Yeah, jump in.
Just regarding point 4, the new representation structure, sort of halfway down that paragraph there, the area between, the council will host, sorry, mate, I've missed it. Council, the drop-in evenings, 2 drop-in evenings will be held on page 20 for those interested in standing for council, the first in Darfield Library and then the second in Rolleston. Do you think that all of the wards, seen as there'll be ward councillors from each of the wards, should also, there should be drop-in evenings for the entire wards?
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, as I said before, we've added a third one, Shane, and that's Westmelton, and that's on Tuesday. Well, so holding 3, we're, as always, ready, willing and able to talk to anybody, anywhere leading up to the election, either through formal meetings or just one-on-one conversations with myself. Should we have one in each ward? If there's a demand in other wards for them, certainly just come back to us and let us know, and we'll arrange dates appropriately.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. And on that matter, it's really good to have people aware of what they're getting into and briefed before standing for council. But people may be reluctant to join in a meeting and out themselves as a potential candidate. And so just wondering the availability of people to be able to pick up the phone and have more of a one-on-one type discussion rather than having to turn up to a group meeting. Has that been accounted for?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to councillors. Look, yes, it has. And I have probably had half a dozen conversations already in the last, let's call it 2 months. And I anticipate that I will have quite a few more as well. But in the first instance, if you have anybody that's showing interest or requires some detail, direct them to myself. I've got a wee PowerPoint slide pack that I'm sending off to people, as well as just giving them the benefit of my own experience in 30 odd years across council.
Great, thank you. Shane, is your hand still up, or is it to speak again?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, sorry, Sam. Point 5 on page 20, the new water pipeline. I just thought I'd take the opportunity to perhaps reflect on the process and just say what an easy, well, no, it wasn't easy. Obviously, there's a lot of work gone into it but from a council's and governance perspective, what a fantastic result for the community, but just an ease of process. And I guess to management, and perhaps this isn't the right place to ask this, Sam, but how do we see this changing if a new entity is introduced?
We don't know. No.
Thank you.
Mover and seconder for David's report, Deborah and Bob. All those in favour say aye or raise your hands. Aye. Anyone against? Speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you. We now move to page 23. It's plan change 72. I understand Rachel, Bob's going to talk us through the plan change, and just note the conflict raised by Deborah and Malcolm, who are stepping back from conversation and decision making on this item. Thanks, Rob.
So, no. so largely procedural. So PC 72 is coming to council for approval. So it has gone to an independent commissioner whose decision was to grant their application. So it's around about approximately 300 houses southeast of Prevelton, between the new park there and the township, all living Z. So, any questions?
Any questions from people? Mover and seconder for the item. Thank you, Murray and Sophie. All those in favour, please raise your hand or say aye. Aye. And anyone against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thanks, Rob. And are you doing the next one as well? Plan change 74. That's on page 125 of today's agenda. Rob.
Yeah, PC 74, so another rezone request. This is east of West Melton, and looking to notify that. Questions?
Any questions or comments on plan change 74? I'll put it to the room. All those in favour say aye. Just put your hand up. And anyone against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you. Thanks, Robert. That's your 2 items. The next item is item 10 on page 135. Andrew Maisie and Graham Huggins presenting the transportation update. Graham, you're on first, so fire away.
Okay, sure. Good afternoon, all. Road naming, the new road through Rolleston Reserve, that will be discussed later in the public excluded. Contract-wise, road maintenance, ticking through as usual. Capital works, low-cost, low-risk projects, Whedon's Ross Road seal widening is ticking along. Goulds Road, Leaston Road intersection, safety upgrade is still in the design phase. Difficulty there with just space. Road frontage upgrades, still investigating and design. Prevelton intersection upgrade stage 2, professional services that has closed and tenders are being evaluated. Roslyn Drive, Tennyson Street traffic signals went live this morning. New footpath connections, teams finished in Leaston and are now working in Colgate. And our road safety update, our road safety education coordinator position has been filled, and Mike Patterson is here to say hello to everyone. Mike, if you want to say a few words.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity for allowing me to be introduced. Just very quickly, I come from a policing background, a 20-year career in the New Zealand Police, split between South Auckland and Canterbury. I left about 2.5, 3 years ago, in which time I've been doing some adult tutoring at NZIS, developing and running their pre-police Defence Force course. I've lived in Selwyn for the last 15 years with my family, so we're involved in the schools and sports clubs locally. And really, I'm just looking forward to the opportunity to build on the good work that have been done by my predecessors in the sort of road safety arena. So, yep, thanks very much. And if there's got any questions in due course, more than happy to field those once I get my feet under the table. Thank you.
Good, Mike. Thank you for those introductions. Welcome along to the team, and we look forward to meeting you in person at some point in the future. Are there any questions that people have for Graham's part of the report? Murray and Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. And I'm not sure if you can answer this now. I just had an inquiry, and sorry, I should have emailed this through to you rather than put you on the spot today. So please feel free to respond later. Just regards the repairs to the Leaston Bridge, the bridge over the Selwyn on Leaston Road. The inquiry was, is that the end of the work done there? They felt that the repair to that on the bank would need some sort of concrete reinforcing, and just to get your view on that. So say if you've got that now. And the other one, Sam, is I see now we still had no response from NZTA. It appears they're waiting for the anniversary of a year to get back to us, which is just abysmal, frankly.
Yeah, I can answer the bridge question. Yes, there is still some armouring to go in there on the abutment.
Thanks, Graham.
And Murray, when I was reading these minutes, I thought, oh, the last month or 2 months, I should have gone back to them, and so I will follow up on that. Thanks for the reminder. Nicole.
So thanks for that, and it's good to hear that the traffic lights have started. If I'd known that, I would have come through there this morning to try them out. Now, with Michael Wood has signed off on the setting of speed limits rule 2022. So do we have a plan on the next round of speed limit reviews? I mean, this has been a long time coming, and because we wanted to do permanent lower speed limits around our urban schools of 40 kilometres an hour. This was the last term of council, which Waka Kotahi said at that time, which they're probably still NZTA, that we couldn't do that. So we've obviously been front-footing this all the way along. So now's our opportunity to go forward for this. So I hope that we've get a plan in place and how we're going to go forward to roll out. We'll try and do those speed limit changes that we'd tried to do in the past. And I was at the Rolleston Residents Association meeting last night, and they raised some issues with the road closure that they had for the Anzac Day, and I've told them to feed it through to you guys, but wasn't quite understanding what they were meaning with what was different from what they were expecting. So thank you.
Yes, for the Anzac Day stuff, yeah, just feed it through to me. I can investigate that. Regarding the next round of speed limits, please come and talk to either myself, Mike Patterson, or Steph Hortler, because we're putting a list together for the next round. And then the 40Ks around school, there's a workshop on Monday through Treffins that Steph Hortler and I are attending.
Deborah.
Is it appropriate to actually ask about councillors' requests? I sent through an email about the speed indicators for Springston, and I also would have liked to understand where the public speed indicators are and what the process is for relocation throughout the district, seeing they're those ones are a district benefit, whereas in regards to Springston, they have been purchased some time ago with fundraised by the community for the speed indicator. Is it appropriate to ask you, Graham, for an update, or for
Sure.
Andrew?
No, I can comment on that. So there's 4 SIDs that are owned by the district, and they will move around. That's something that I will discuss with Mike. It fell under the road safety coordinator previously. So once Mike's got his feet under the desk, we will go through that and come up with a program for shifting them. Springston, the ground sockets are going in on Friday. The concrete will have to set for a minimum of 2 weeks after that. So the signs, well, one sign should be up mid-May, earliest.
Thank you very much for that. I'm sure the community would be really pleased to hear that news. And also, I'd just like to thank through you, Grant Chesterman, for the road closures and the management of those road closures that he undertook for Anzac Day. Can you pass on appreciation? Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane and Mark.
Kia ora, Graham, thanks for the report, and also no mai haere mai, Mike, great to have you on board. Look forward to meeting you face to face. Thanks, Murray, for bringing up the wee bridge there. I actually spoke to the lady this morning as well, so I appreciate you bringing that up. Graham, is there a more follow-up to the High Street Lake Road intersection and the respray of the pedestrian crossings and some of the signage there. There was a study undertaken with Mark Chamberlain before he left, and I've mentioned it a couple of times. You've gotten back to me, but the community had expected a refresh of that intersection and also some of those pedestrian crossings, and it seems to have there's a few markings on the road, but no sort of update on that. So that would be appreciated, perhaps, if that goes into the council requests. I don't mean to put you on the spot right now, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can follow up on that.
And Mark.
Three things. Firstly, Graham, I'd like to thank your team and the contractors for the work on the Tennyson Street, Ralston Drive traffic lights. It's been a great job keeping that intersection at least partially open for as much as you could and getting it finished on time, and I hope on budget. It's been a great result. If I wasn't having to self-isolate, I would have driven through there this morning. So I look forward to being allowed to escape next week and actually see them in operation. I think they're a great outcome for the community, and it's a great job that we kept the intersection open as much as we could, as long as we could. So that's a job well done. And so please pass that on. I believe part of the problem with the Ralston Anzac Day road closures was that they didn't have a parade this year. And so the road closure was for the old parade. We would have been parading from the community centre through to the clock tower. And that wasn't occurring. And it prevented people being able to use the New World car park, for example, for parking. So it was sort of they'd shorten the area needed, and it fell through the gap somewhere. So, but at least it was closed. The final point is, when we're talking about 40k around schools, can we be smart? 40k around schools needs to be around schools when schools are in operation. It doesn't need to be around schools at 2 a.m. I have a concern that if we do 40k 24/7, it will encourage people to ignore it, because a lot of our schools don't feel like 40k. They don't look like 40k when schools are not in operation. And I'd hope that we can be smarter with electronic signage when we come to that, to have 40k limits.
Mark, we're not talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm just getting. Someone else mentioned it, Sam, so I'm getting my licks in too. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come to speed limits when we are dealing with speed limits on the agenda, and we've got a paper in front of us to discuss the outcome. I'll hand to Andrew Maisie. Thank you, Graham, for that. And I'll just back up the comments that Mark made around the way that those works were done. It was really great to get feedback on the intersection from some of the businesses and their experience of the contractor and our staff in trying to keep disruption as little as possible. And just want to thank the businesses that are on that corner for their patience with us over the last couple of years of upgrades that have gone on there. So yeah, well done to you and the staff. Andrew.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all surviving out there okay. I'll just run through a few of the key aspects in my section of the report that may be of interest to you. Just touching on the walking and cycling strategy update. So we have developed a new strategy, and we're in the process of developing the accompanying action plan, and we've been involved with the reserves team on that in terms of bringing in that more recreational and tourism focus to the strategy. So we're not too far away in terms of being able to get that in front of you for a bit of a discussion on that. But I've also decided that we should embark on also our public, sort of a public transport strategy and travel demand strategy as the sort of the three-pronged approach, if you want to put it that way, to dealing with working towards mode shift, which, as you know, will become an increasingly important thing that we need to consider in the environment of emissions and climate change, and the direction that transport, particularly from the government's perspective, want us to head towards. So an opportunity there, we might as well strike now and try and get some runs on the board. They may not be, full centuries, but we've got to make a start somewhere. And we're going to bring this along with the public transport and the TDM, along with the walking and cycling strategy, to make sure that we've got sort of cross continuity on those type of aspects. So we'd probably be expecting that for those that towards more the end of the year, that we can sort of see and show you how all those three strands can be brought together. I've included in the report what we submitted to Environment Canterbury on in terms of the fair review. I won't go into that. I think it's all there in black and white, as you're already aware of. But also that point that was raised in the Regional Transport Committee in terms of directing its staff to consider passenger rail in Canterbury, and again how this may interact or need to interact with the MRT proposals that are also being discussed with the Greater Christchurch work around that. The road user charges that the government was asking for submissions on, the RTC again prepared a collective submission on that on the region's behalf, and I think a couple of weeks ago the committee had a discussion around that draft, and those changes have been implemented into the final submission, which actually was produced by the committee about a day after this report was compiled. So for the next report, I'll attach that submission so you've got it there to reference. Certainly, I think quite a lot of the discussion were involved around getting the right balance between what an urban outcome should be in terms of the utilisation of road user charges compared to a rural one. And so there was quite a bit of balancing that needed to be brought into the paper to be able to address those concerns by the RTC members. Rolleston State Highway and Access Project, flyover, etc. As I understand, Wakatahahi are coming back on the morning of the 25th of May to discuss that further with you prior to going out to public engagement. So I'm yet to sort of understand quite exactly what they're going to discuss with you, but it's around their preferred option and the further work they've been doing to finesse that option based on the discussion that they had with you a month or so back. The Tankerous Road ceiling, that's now been completed. There has been some discussion, as I understand, or been involved in, around the completion of berms and drainage issues and a few things like that. Just wanted to point out that project still is in its maintenance period. So if there's any problems that sort of appear from that perspective, we've got an ability to attend to those as we need to. The Prevelton RTL intersection upgrades, again, I might have touched on before, the issues with needing to make sure that we're aligned with plan change 68 and any implications from that. And basically the implication from that plan change is that we'll need to upgrade our plans, if you want to put it that way, from the single lane roundabout configuration at Shands Trents to a dual lane. And on that basis, the plan change 68 applicant would be responsible for all those costs to make that transition between from a single to a dual lane on the basis of the extra traffic that they're putting into that intersection. But we still have a road to hoe in that regards in terms of working through what the outcome of the plan change 68 will be, developer agreements and things like that. But we're progressing on the basis that we're planning for a dual lane roundabout there. And as I mentioned to a few of the ward councillors in the last couple of days, we are now starting to make contact with the property owners around those two intersections to start the discussion on how we are going to progress procuring the land for those intersection upgrades. So just be aware of that if anything appears in social media or anything, that's what we're currently doing at the moment. Streets for People initiative, a bit of a disappointment there in terms of our application being declined. I haven't been able to have the ability to investigate further why, but I've included in there the Wakatahahi's basically generalised statement in terms of reasons for declining applications. So not really much more I can say about that apart from it being disappointed on it, but I have raised it through the regional transport officers group that when we look towards formatting a new regional land transport plan, that we as a collective set of councils work more towards getting ourselves lined up for this and this opportunity in the future, as opposed to sort of going it alone and getting picked off potentially as we have individually. Greater Christchurch Partnership, I've listed there what we're up to in terms of how MRT is going to progress through the 3 stages in terms of the Rickett and Papanui Road corridors, then how to expand out to Sell and Waimak, and then potentially how heavy rail may be impact or may influence any of those type of decisions. But again, I draw that reference to the RTC requirement in terms of exploring this about the interregional transport passenger rail services and how that may interact with that. I think that pretty much does it for me, and so I'm happy to answer any questions on any of those aspects or anything else.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. And the conversation with Whakakotahi NZTA in a couple of weeks' time, they wanted more time than we had in a public forum for an afternoon meeting, so we've included it as a public briefing, which will take place in the morning, but will be live streamed and available for the public to see the changes that Whakakotahi are thinking around the flyover and connection between either side of State Highway 1 and Tuwharikahu, Ralston. Thank you for that, Andrew. We have Nicole and Grant.
Thanks, Andrew, for your report, and just want to say it's really good to see the updating of the walking and cycling strategy, and actually, and also incorporating it to public transport and travel demand management is obviously a really good way to go for us moving forward. So that's really, I just wanted to say thank you for doing that, and I look forward to seeing what the outcome is. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Grant.
Thanks, Sam. I wanted to take this opportunity, I suppose, to thank, I think in the first instance, it might be Councillor McInnes who came up with the Streets for People initiative and brought it to our attention. It was. But thank you, Andrew, for your work in putting the application. And I suppose for the people, if any, watching it, I think it's worth just reading out the statement from NZTA. Based on the learnings from the evaluation of Innovating Streets 2021, we are now working with a smaller cohort of councils for the new program to ensure they are well supported and set up for success. Andrew, I think you're a beautiful diplomat, but I would call it mealy mouth weasel words. And it just appears to us, what does someone have to do to get a crack at this funding? Because you talk about shovel-ready projects and all the opportunities that have come through Canterbury, and it seems that for whatever reason, and I'm starting to get a bit of a cynical syndrome going on here, someone never seems to get a crack of the whip in these things. And what would have been a fantastic project, and you'd like to compare Lincoln particularly against the ones who won funding out of this to see what is the pinch point, what is the difference that these other projects get funded and we don't. And you can't help but feel it's political interference, because it just seems amazing to us that we put in good projects and staff spend a lot of time doing it, and they don't get the fair crack of the whip. And I'm looking forward to seeing NZTA Whakakotahi come here, because they seem to be treating us with a degree of disdain. I know they're working hard with us on some intersection projects, and we appreciate that. But the fact that we've had an outstanding question with them for nearly a year doesn't give you a lot of confidence, does it? And I guess they need to be heard loud and clear that we are getting frustrated with some elements of their service. And I guess we don't want to be cut off at the knees in the projects they are funding, but it does appear we are really struggling to get them to get engaged. So I'm having my little rant there, but unfortunately I haven't finished. Tancred's Road ceiling. We did one great project in Ralston where we got commendation from the surrounding landowners. Unfortunately, the Tancred's Road ceiling didn't fall into that category. The feedback from the surrounding owners was it took far too long. It was closed by obstructive contractors who weren't engaging with the community, and the outcome, while welcomed by the adjoining landowners, not to the standard that he would expect from a council road, particularly the drainage. So I've raised those issues with Andrew and his team, and they have obviously, as always, promptly responded about my concerns. But it has to be noted in a public forum that there are two levels of delivery, and this, from a public perception, certainly didn't meet the level of delivery we would expect.
Thank you, Grant, for those comments. Sophie.
Kia ora, Andrew, and anybody else who's still listening there from your team. Thank you very much for your report, as always. I guess I've got two questions. One, so there's a mention about Prevelton arterial intersection upgrades with regard to plan change 68. So just before this, we agreed that plan change 78, no, 72. Yep, was going to go ahead. That's obviously by the intersection with Hamptons and Springs. Is that likely to prompt any changes or anything to do with the level of traffic that will then be going through Prevelton as well? And the other part was around the walking and cycling strategy. As Nicole said, I want to second that. Great to see that that's going through, especially if it's going to have a public transport aspect to it. I guess the question there is whether the work that you guys put together for Lincoln around innovating streets for people is going to, does that sort of thing get fed into walking and cycling? Because that's, yeah, it's not just about walking and cycling, it's about a whole streetscape. So yeah, so you're nodding, that's great. Is it something that's likely to go through for public consultation as well, or are you just going to present it to us and we get to say, yeah, sure?
Well, that's certainly our expectation that we would present drafts for you to have a comment on, and we would then publicly consult. And that's where I was sort of coming from, is the fact that, well, you know, I was intending, and I think we were all intending, that the walking cycling strategy would be publicly consulted on. So I thought, well, let's do the three of them all in sync, if you want to put it that way. And because we get a lot of crossover comments and submissions, and if we do all of them at once, the three at once, we can hopefully sort of cover all bases. So that was sort of my theory in that regard. So, and certainly the Streets for People and the issues we've had with that was another thing that influenced me in terms of thinking, well, you know, for instance, you know, the Fitzgerald Street, those inclusion of those cycle lanes was a key element in terms of trying to get and promote more people to use sustainable transport and things like that. And, you know, as we all know, every good bus journey starts with a walking or cycling journey. So again, you can see how all the links should try and join up, and that's what I'm thinking I'm trying to work towards to achieve in terms of bringing these three sort of strategies together along at the same time. You know, in terms of, we've had the walking cycling strategy before, a couple of iterations before on that, and so we're well versed with that type of strategy and its development. You know, we have first steps for the public transport one and first steps for TDM, but again, with the type of work that's needed to come out of the Greater Christchurch partnership, we need to be able to start tying a whole lot of things together and have a crack at that, and that's what I'm intending to do in the first instance.
Cool. At the risk of waking up or hinting that maybe a fourth strand might involve the recent changes to rules around speed limits, that might be worth adding in there if Graham's teams fancy that. Just that, because slow streets or slower areas also, you know, obviously impact it. So I don't know if that can feed in. And the only other comment is, it's such a shame that the RLTP and only ever seems to fund about, I think, was it less than 2% of their budget this time round has gone towards walking and cycling. If it was more than that, then maybe they'd be able to fund more streets for people. Thanks.
Yeah, and just if I wanted to follow up on that question about Springs, Hamptons, certainly in terms of our Premilton arterial intersection upgrade program, there was 5 key projects in terms of the roundabouts, and we've done the first 2 being at Springs Marshes and Shands Blakes. We've got the next 2 on the go being Shands Trents and Shands Hamptons, and then the last one is at Springs and Hamptons, and so that's already dialed in. We haven't identified any issues with our current concept design being a single lane roundabout in regards to the plan changes more in that sort of southeastern area of Prevelton. So at this point in time, it all seems to be okay to proceed with that when we get to it, which is programmed for 24-25, subject to Wakatahi funding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Deborah.
Thank you, Andrew, for your report. I've got a question, and I just want to understand, do we have a strategic traffic structure plan for Prevelton? And the reason why I'm bringing this forward is because driver behaviour will always find the quickest route to actually try and get where they're going. And we already have a situation within Christchurch City where Shands Road now has 6 intersection sets of lights in close proximity to each other. And to actually gain access to the motorway, you have to access through 2 sections of those lights. Is there a real danger of people actually concentrating on access through Springs Road? And also with regards to Birches Road, Springs Road intersection, do we envisage having to have traffic lights, or will people actually go through and use other access ways that, you know, that might not have been thought about, causing congestion on some of the smaller rural roads around the back of Hallswell, interlinking? And I'm just wondering, do we have a, you know, strategic traffic management plan for Prevelton?
We have the plan that was based on, or is all based on, the business case that we developed for Prevelton and all the traffic and transport upgrades that we were wanting to progress at that time. That first started back in 2013, and we're still in the process of implementing it in terms of getting, as the availability of Wakatahi funding comes available. And the 5 key arterial roundabout upgrades were the key plank to that, if you want to put it that way. And as I said, of which we're delivering on at the moment. But certainly we have also been looking at the issue with Springs Road through Prevelton, and again, sort of referencing the more current thinking around slower speed environments, shared spaces and things like that. And there is already a project identified with Wakatahi through the Road to Zero program for in the future to actually implement a slower speed environment through the centre of Prevelton, so we can discourage through traffic. You've already made a really good start on that in terms of the current reduction of the speed limit from what it was to 40 k's, but we're looking at taking that another step further in terms of potentially even going down to 30 k's through that central part of Prevelton. And so as a result of that, the traffic will divert around the perimeter, and that's where our investment is going at the moment, to get that perimeter network set up to cater for that traffic. And that's where, for instance, we've widened Blake's Road, we're going to widen Trent's Road as part of that roundabout upgrade, we're going to widen Hampton's Road, all on the basis of getting that traffic shifted off Springs Road and using the arterial route off Shands Road to the motorway interchange. And just in regards to your comments about all the traffic lights, yeah, we agree. We actually advocated to the City Council, in conjunction with Wakatahi as well, to eliminate at least one set of those traffic lights on Shands Road north of the interchange. They've put in staggered intersections with staggered traffic signals, which we actually thought was unnecessary, but we're not the road controlling authority, and they made their decisions, and there it is. But it's interesting, remember that originally people were asking for traffic signals at Springs and Marshes and Shands and Blake's. And if we'd actually gone down that track, it would have been a very complicated part of the network with lots of traffic signals, I can assure you.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks for those answers, Andrew. I mean, you know, I'm very aware of where we're trying to get here. I do have some concerns looking to the future, however. At the moment, we are looking at trying to get people out of Springs Road, which has always been my desire. And the on-ramp on Springs Road is the biggest issue, that is biggest disappointment I've had in many years, that keeps the traffic through the township. My concern now is, and I get some feedback from the local population who are now using those traffic lights to get onto the motorway. My concern now is that there are a large number of plan changes around Prevelton itself and further out, which will increase the traffic flow on Shands Road And I'm concerned how Shands Road and those lights accessing the motorway are going to cope in 5 years' time. So that's just something that we might need to start doing some crystal ball gazing or looking at traffic flow calculations to the future, because I can see that becoming an issue should the developments that are the private plan changes that are put in be successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm, and those comments, and Deborah, and those that have contributed to this item. Andrew, for the work that's gone on with Graham to present this report. I think we're looking forward to the walking and cycling strategy, along with the 2 or 3 others that you're going to bring to us. I just wonder about, because they're so linked, and to avoid confusion with the community, we do need to think about whether it is actually one strategy with 2 or 3 different parts to it, rather than multiple strategies that each require individual submissions and things getting a bit more complicated. So we'll have that discussion when it comes to us, but thinking about how the whole piece of work fits together to get the outcome we're looking for on our Selwyn roads is important. So thank you, we'll look forward to that coming. Mover and seconder for this report, Nicole and Jenny, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand or speak up. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. And the next matter is a property transaction update, and this is on page 143. Douglas, I'll hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Bishop. There's nothing I could add to the agenda that is there, perhaps apart from highlight the photos of the youth park space, which is charging ahead at the moment.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments of the property update? Yes. Deborah.
Just one clarification on page 145. We were applying for the TIF funding, Tourism Infrastructure Fund. When we're looking at round 6, bullet point 1, where is the grain shed public toilet located?
Darfield, opposite the Darfield Motels.
Okay, thank you.
And Murray?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Douglas, just page 148, Mead Hall, and just like to pass on, I was there on Anzac Day, just like to pass on from the locals there that they're extremely happy with the interaction I've had with Sue and Kevin and Mark over that project so far, and just thought we often bring you questions that are tricky and perhaps not so savoury, and just like to pass that on, feedback from the community, so thank you.
Grant Miller.
Bob? Okay. Yeah, Bob. Yeah, just another query from the community board last night. Is there any chance of toilets at Kirwee? There was a person came forward last night asking, is that now scheduled anywhere?
No, it's not in the schedule. It would best to be dealt with as a submission to the draft annual plan. One thing we will be doing though is looking to put a connection in when the main runs to the west of State Highway 73, but about where the challenge garage is. That's just because it's sensible to put a connection why it's a dead pipe as opposed to a live pipe, which is the obvious to you. But we think that's the best place. We just to highlight there are toilets at the reserve. I do appreciate off the main road, but we have quite an extensive network of toilets on the State Highway, which is why staff have promoted these ones in the last wee while.
Grant.
Page 153, the Foster Park House. I just asked that before that paper comes to the council, we have an opportunity to view the property as councillors. They just tell us the time and date to be there to have a look at it.
If we finish early, we could go for a walk, I suppose. Yeah.
Yep. Sophie.
Quick question, I hope. For Reed's Pit, the potential extension of a footpath or cycleway from the existing one to allow people to get there. How's that going? It's mentioned, but yeah, just wondering.
It's part of an intersection at Selwyn Road, Lincoln, Rolleston Road. So there's land that has to be purchased. We need to get an indicative design, which is, I think it's underway, but there will be some period. It would I would think it could be at least 12 to 24 months, unfortunately, before we can acquire, because I'm just not sure where the planning is for that site, but it's not an easy resolution, because if we we could potentially put a footpath in part of it, but we just need to be mindful how the road, its intersection itself will work.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Sam. I had a similar question for Reed's Pit. We show an anticipated time frame for the completion of the works is the 30th of June. What point after that is it going to be open for the public, who may have to drive there to get there themselves and their young people there safely? But at what point, at what date will the facilities be open for public use? Is it July 1?
Yeah, our intention is 1 July. It's important to note that there is an off-site car park on Whedon's Road, which allows people, but there is no doubt that it's a wee bit of a tricky site to get into, and we need to direct people in through the right point until we can get that long-term solution of footpath through to it.
Yeah, there is also the ability to cycle, though it's a slightly longer route via Levi Road and Whedon's Road to it, because that's also a potential cycling connection. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it being open. Hopefully we'll have a more formal opening event in the spring, because there's certainly a community interest and community demand in it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Mover and seconder for this report. Thank you, Murray and Bob. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Anyone against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thanks, Douglas. It brings us to the end of the public portion of this meeting. There was no public forum to review. So if I could have a mover and a seconder that we move into PX, Jenny and Deborah, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against, speak up now. Declare it carried. Thank you, everyone, and we'll adjourn the meeting till 2:30 and allow you to get a cup of tea and stretch your legs, and we'll come back again at 2:30. Thank you.